Hi all, and welcome to Graphics and Audios Week in Games Programme. So this video I'm going to do a bit of an overview of types of graphics you can use, types of audio you can use, and why you might want to use them. So this week's task is to think, what will your graphics look like? Where are you going to get them from? There's lots of places you can get them from, but where are you going to get yours from? And do you need audio within your game? So remember, there's actually 0 marks for the actual graphics and audio, okay? There are marks regarding using the graphics audio to good effect. So this means that you don't need to create the graphics audio at all. You can if you want to, but if you want to get them from the internet or from a different source, you can just do that. And as long as it's royalty free, remember you cannot breach copyright within this module, then you can use them. So what kinds of graphics and audio are there, and what should you think about when choosing your graphics and audio? There's really 3 types of graphics. They're vectors, which use the built-in primitives, things like circles, lines, triangles, rectangles, all these sorts of things. There's sprites, which are 2D and are usually made from pixels. And there's 3D modeling, which speaks for itself. It's creating a 3D model of a world. So if you look at vector graphics, the advantage is they're completely resolution independent. You can use any resolution at all. So if you're doing a game that's going to work on a big, say a big tablet and a small mobile phone, then vector graphics could be an option for you. They're okay with limited artistic ability. So if you look at some games, thinking of things like Geometry Wars, Vector TD, they made games with basically circles and triangles, and actually they've been really famous and really good games. So those are people who obviously didn't have a lot of artistic ability, or at least didn't show it in their games, and still they've had really good games. They're scalable, so you can make them bigger and smaller, and you can do that without prejudice. They tend to take very low memory usage, so if you're using a device that's not a lot of memory for a game, then it's great for that. The real disadvantage is it's difficult to have very fine detail. They tend to be quite lacking in detail. Sprites are also called bitmap graphics. If you Google both, you'll get different things coming out. So I think it's important to know that sprites and bitmap graphics are the same, but people use the terms fairly interchangeably. The advantages are you do not need much processor power at all. So something that's quite low powered, as well as having vector graphics will work, sprites will also work. They tend to be easier to create than 3D graphics. So they tend to be flat. In fact, I think all examples I can think of are flat, but I'm sure one of you will come with counterexamples of that. And it's just easier to create things on a flat plane. They do tend to allow fine detail. To a certain degree, that will depend on what kind of bitmap and resolution you're working at. If you look at things like the really retro Mario or Sonic games, those characters at that point didn't have a lot of fine detail because they didn't have very many squares to work with, but nowadays that's changed. Disadvantages, it's really 2D only. I'll speak about that in a second. You do need some artistic ability because you actually have to draw these things out, and they really don't scale. If you try and make them larger or smaller, they tend not to work. When we talk about sprites, we often talk about sprite sheets. So sprite sheets are things like the image of the cat here, which allows you to have an animation from the sprites. So what you do is you go through each image in turn, and by doing that fast enough, you end up with something looking like it's moving. Note, it may not be 1 frame per image. It can be slightly more frames per image. What you've got to do is try and get it so it's steady when you play it. 2D graphics, if you're doing that, you've really got to choose a perspective. You've got to do it quite early because it really changes the feel of your game. So there's top down, which is looking down from above. There's side scrolling, which are things are moving from the side, either side over. There's vertical scrolling, things are either coming down from the top or going up from the bottom. There's also what we call 2.5D, which is really faking depth. So it's making it look a bit more like it's 3D. And you can do that either with scaling or the one I'm particularly fond of, which is parallax scrolling. Parallax scrolling is when the background image moved by the camera slower than the foreground image. And this creates an illusion of depth in a 2D image scene and can add a feeling of immersion. It can add a feeling of it actually being 3D, even though it's not, hence why the 2.5D label. So here's a parallax scrolling example. I've got my background, my middle, and my foreground. My background's going to move the slowest, then my middle, and then my foreground in the front. And if I play this video here, you can see the effect of that. Hopefully you can see these things are moving at a slightly different speed. In general, we usually say the foreground's moving about full speed, the middle's moving about 1/3 speed, and the background's moving about 2/3 speed. So middle's the fastest, then foreground's the fastest, then the middle, then the background. You can see how that works. 3D modelling. The advantage is it can look really realistic, which is really great if you want to create a really immersive game. If you want to create a VR game, this is really your only choice. It allows folks to move around within the world, and it lets you make 3D games. There's no other real way to make 3D games. The disadvantage is it requires a lot of artistic ability. So you really got to be able to draw to create this immersive 3D world. Also, it's a steep learning curve to learn the tools. So if you're going to make something in Blender, learning Blender itself is a good at least a week of work. Probably a lot more than that to actually get good at it. So which graphic style should you choose? Well, the first thing to think about is what genre is your game. Some games tend to lend themselves better to different genres. Who's your audience? What do they expect? If it's for children, it's probably going to be brightly coloured, it's probably going to be quite big and bold. If it's for hardcore gamers who like first-person shooters, probably going to expect a 3D world and probably going to expect it to be quite fine-grained and detail. You've also got to think about which software and hardware platform you're using. In this case, especially think about the hardware. If you're using a phone, it's a very small screen, you've just got less real estate. Okay. Another really important thing to think about is what can you actually get hold of. So you might have this dream idea of these are the graphics I want. You have to scale it back a bit because you just can't find what you need. That's fine, and that's understandable in a module like this, which is really more about the programming of the game than it is about the graphics. Next thing is audio. Does your game actually need audio? Does it need music? Quite a lot of games, the music in the background becomes a really famous part of the games. In fact, there's even concerts now which just play music from games. Do you need other audible clues? Sometimes these are easier than visual ones. So, for example, if you're running out of time on a level, speeding up the music gives a real sense of tension, and the player kind of becomes aware of the fact that they need to speed up themselves. That's quite an interesting one. You can also use audio to aid gameplay. So, for example, if you're shooting a bullet, you might want a bullet sound. If you're jumping on an enemy's head, you might want a sound for that. If you unlock a door, you might want some creaking noise to unlock a door. So it can really make the game feel